Today we're going to have a look at how we multiply algebraic terms together. So let's begin. So let's start by considering 2 times 3 times 5. Now you might already know that we can actually write this in any order and it'll still equal the same. For example, I might write this as 3 times 5 times 2. And that will still equal the same. It will still equal 30. Now this understanding of when we're multiplying numbers together, we can rearrange them in any order we like and it'll still equal the same number is known as the associative law. Now we can use this understanding of the associative law with algebraic terms. Now when we're multiplying algebraic terms together, we can actually rearrange the multiplication to group all the numbers together, and we can do that first. Then we can group all the variables together separately. So for example, in the first problem I've got here, 5a times 2. This problem can actually be written as 5 times a times 2. And because I'm multiplying everything together, I can rearrange this in whatever order I'd like. So let's rearrange it by collecting the numbers together at the start. So that's going to be equal to 5 times 2 times then just the variable of a. So that's times a. And now what you can see is it allows me to simplify this by going, well, 5 times 2 is 10. So this is equal to 10 times a. But we know that when we've got a coefficient multiplying a variable, we can write it as 10a. So 5a times 2 is equal to 10a. But what happens when there's more than one variable involved? Well, let's take a look. Remember, I can actually rewrite this statement as 3 times d times 5 times c. And the associative law tells me that I can rewrite any statement that's just got multiplication in every step in any order that I like. So let's group together the numbers first. So that's going to be equal to 3 times 5. And then I want to group the variables together. But I want to group the variables together so they're in alphabetical order. Now, whilst mathematically it doesn't make any difference what order you write variables in, it is customary to write them in alphabetical order. It's a little bit like when I'm reading off of a page. It's customary for me to read from left to right. However, it could just as easily be made customary to write from right to left. But we have this custom in place so everyone's doing the same thing. In mathematics here, we list our variables in alphabetical order. So that's going to be times c and then times d. But of course, I can now go 3 times 5 is 15. So that's equal to 15 times c times d, which can be written as 15 c d. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of other examples. Here I've been asked to simplify the following. Now, in our first problem, I can rewrite this as 3 times a times negative 5 times b. And the associative law says I can rewrite it in any order I like. So I'm going to rewrite it by grouping the numbers together, 3 times negative 5, and grouping the variables together in alphabetical order, so times a times b. Now I simplify the numbers, that's going to be 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15. And then that's going to be multiplied by a, multiplied by b, which is going to be ab. So this is going to be equal to negative 15 ab. Now with question 2, there is something that we need to be aware of when we're writing this out. The first part's still the same. It's equal to 10 times x. Then we need to multiply it by negative 1. Now the reason for that is we've got to remember that in front of this x value is a 1. So it's actually got a coefficient of negative 1 and then we multiply it by the x. So when we go to rearrange this, this is going to be equal to 10 times negative 1 times x times x. Now 10 times negative 1 is negative 10. And x times x is x squared. So this is going to be negative 10 times x squared, which is equal to negative 10x squared. Now as you can see, when we follow these steps, it can make simplifying these just that little bit easier. So the next problem, let's start by breaking it apart. So this is 6 times r times s times r. The associative law says we can rewrite this in whatever order because there's nothing but multiplying here. So let's put the numbers first, so it's 6, then the letters in alphabetical order. It's going to be times r times s. Now because 6 is on its own, we just leave that there, so it's equal to 6 times r is going to be r squared. So it's times r squared. Then s is on its own, so it just times as s. So therefore, our final answer is 6 times r squared times s, which we can write like that. But what happens if you've got a longer problem like I've got here? Well, you just do the same thing. We start by breaking it up. So it's going to be 20 times c times d times negative 5 times c times negative 2. And the associative law says I can rewrite it in whatever order because there's nothing but multiplication between each of these. So that's going to be 20 times negative 5 times negative 2, because I'm going to group the numbers at the start. Now I do the variables in alphabetical order. So that's going to be multiplied by c, multiplied by c, multiplied by d. Now let's simplify the numbers. 20 times negative 5 is going to be negative 100. Negative 100 times negative 2 is going to be positive 200. So it's going to be equal to 200 multiplied by c times c is c squared. So it's going to be c squared, then multiplied just by that d that doesn't multiply anything else. So therefore, this statement can be simplified to 200 c squared d. So when we're multiplying terms together, the first thing I suggest you do is actually break the problem up to have the numbers first and then have the variables in alphabetical order. But once you've done that, you multiply the numbers together. Then you multiply the variables together and you write the variables in alphabetical order. So now what I'd like you to do is to have a go for yourself.